Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Danny Katz is with me, and this is Words number 26. And I've heard from a lot of people that you guys like our sort of pre-show ramble that we do. And today it's a really pre-show ramble because we haven't even really spoken to each other in like 2 weeks. And we just pushed record as soon as we got on. So we have no idea what we might talk about, what we think we're going to talk about talking about, or any of that kind of stuff. I have no idea what's going on with her. She has no idea what's going on with me. Danny, how's it going?
Hi, Emily. Happy belated birthday. How was it?
It was a shit show like everything else.
Man.
But it was fine. It was a fabulous shit show, right? Like, we went on a little getaway with a group of friends, and nothing went as planned. Everything was, like, way more complicated than it needed to be. And, like, you know, you had to play all the little games with masks. It was, like, hide and seek or Halloween and shit like that.
Where did you go?
We went to Phoenix.
Okay.
We kind of did some little things around. So everything was like when we got back, we both agreed we're not 100% sure what the little walkabout was about, but that it was about something. There was some level of something that was sort of cleared internally for each of us.
Okay.
Everything was, so like we went, you know, Laura and I had been to Phoenix the month before. Her family lives there. You know what I mean? We had been there and it had been wonderful and open and free and we had a great time. And this time it was like being here in Los Angeles in March when everybody was freaking out.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up because 2 seconds ago I thought, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Why are the Republican states now shut down? Explain this to me. What is going on?
I have no idea. Like, I knew this was going to happen. Like, that's why I was even said, like, we have to be really careful about choosing to move somewhere else because it's a trick, right? Like, this is how I've always looked at, well, not always. At a certain point, for many years, I was following data streams that were based on a lot of fear, right? And even though there was always some level of truth to them, like one of the fear memes that was propagated with incredible strength for a number of years was the idea of a global coastal event, right? Where like all the people who live on coasts, because of some event that's going to happen, it's going to be disastrous, and right? But I also noticed at the same, and I've talked about this before, so for those of you who've heard me say this in other contexts, my apologies for repeating myself. But one of the things I noticed was at the same time that these stories were at their height, their fervor pitch, and I was kind of getting exhausted of like this stuff, I noticed that Larry Ellison, who owns Oracle, which is a predictive software, was buying up a ton of land in Malibu. And he's not stupid, and right, rich people generally didn't get that way by being stupid. Some of them did. He's incredibly wealthy and he owns a predictive software company, right? So he obviously wouldn't buy that land if it was going to just be underwater.
Right.
I imagine that's more hassle to go. I don't see insurance fraud as part of his scam, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, okay. So he was buying up all this land there. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to where wealthy people are making their investments in building things, because those, even though they might be expensive or whatever, I don't think those are places that are going to be easily fuckwithable by natural disasters or other things, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop worrying about that. Because literally there was a time when I was like, okay, is downtown far enough inland for me to be in case there's a global coastal? And I just realized, I'm like, if he's building his mansion on, yeah, stop, just stop. So I feel like, but what wealthy people do love to do is like vulture things, right? So if they can scare people, if they run it first in the coastal states where everything is expensive, run the hardcore lockdowns, so people are like, oh, we're going to flee to the suburbs or to the Midwest or whatever, where there's more freedom and whatever, right? So people will sell really quickly their expensive property, right, on the West Coast or on the East Coast, so that they can run towards freedom, right? And then the wealthy people can come in and buy up the properties for a lot less, you know, for pennies on the dollar, because everybody has moved over to the other place that's eventually going to get hit with the same bullshit laws, right? So I think it was always designed to go in waves. I think that, like, you know, this idea that people have was, okay, well, I'll just go somewhere else. They want to quash out the idea that there's any place that you can go for any degree of freedom. So far, the only states that seem to be holding out in any meaningful way are South Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and
I've heard
Montana. Yeah. And then also, like, it seems like Nebraska and Missouri also are like there seems to be, like, I've heard some of the, like, the governors or the mayors or some people are saying, like, if you do a mask mandate, you're not going to be eligible for certain kinds of funds. You can go ahead and do a mask mandate in your cities if you want, but if you do, you're not going to be eligible for certain kinds of assistance. So that's what I've read some articles about that. It's been a few weeks since I read that. So those two states also seem to be having some kind of thing. I don't know. It's sort of, it's hard to tell, but no, I think that, like, there's, you know, like, they've done this trick on the Republican states where in the beginning, when all of the crazy stuff was happening in the blue states and the coastal states, it was based on numbers of deaths. And now to trick everybody into thinking there's these huge numbers, everything's being based on numbers of quote unquote cases.
But we all know that they're fake, and the Republican governors certainly know that they're fake. So I'm just wondering, what do they have on the Republican governors, or where are they going? There's enough. It's not hard for me to find information on the internet of how they're faking the numbers. Now, first of all, cases that have already been healed are still counted in the cases, and now probable cases are counted in the cases. And if your doctor looks at you and you have a headache, that's all of a sudden COVID. So right. How stupid are we at this point?
Well, the other thing is if you get tested, like, apparently there's a few different kinds of tests, right? So if you get, let's say you get both kinds and they're both positive, they count it as two positives, even though it's only one person.
Correct.
So they're doing that thing too. So it must be about funds, like that you can't get certain kinds of federal disaster funds unless you do certain things. I don't know what it is at this point. Like, I'm still, like, so when we were in Arizona this time, I did have a waitress who told me that she knew a couple of people that had it. This is the first time I've met anybody that knows anybody who has right, and they've been tested, right? Other people that I know who said that they knew someone who had it, they hadn't been tested, just the doctor said they had it or whatever, right? So I said, but was it a big deal? She was like, no, it was like flu. They, like, felt bad for a couple of days and they're fine. Everybody's fine. So this whole thing, but people in Arizona are now scared the way people were here in the beginning. So I actually felt like there's more freedom here now than there is in Arizona. Because
yeah, that's what I've heard. I've been talking to friends. It feels like now all of a sudden LA is better than all the other places.
It's fun. It's weird in LA, right? Because they're saying that they've closed the restaurants again. No, they haven't. They just closed the dining room, right? So you can still eat out on the patio, and there's like tons of people. Like, we were just out in Santa Monica the other day. Everybody's out there. You know, the people, restaurants that don't have patios have been able to move their restaurant out onto the street. They've, like, blocked off part, you know, kind of stuff. So there's people out and about. So, like, it was we were out in Santa Monica and Venice, and there was a lot of people out on the streets, and it wasn't like as many as usual. You know what I mean? But it was very, it was nothing like it was here when we first locked down. Right? There was a lot of commotion going on, and I didn't see a particular lot of, like, the mask wearing was all very ceremonial. Like, the moment they passed the front door of the restaurant, they just, you know, as soon as they're anywhere near their table, they take it off, right? The tables weren't particularly social distanced, you know what I mean? Like, they weren't super close together, but it wasn't like the first time I went out to eat after Nia's happened and they were all, like, really far, right? So, like, I have no idea what the fuck is going on. Like, it's just very, you know, like, it's very, like, my dad said to me, and this was heartbreaking. I had a conversation with my dad yesterday, and we've had some tense conversations over this period of time, and some that were actually, like, fairly reasonable, and, like, he was able to kind of get into a hard place and understand. And we were having this conversation yesterday, and I said to him that, you know, I think regardless of what you believe, whether you think it's real or not, at a certain point, we need to have a deeper conversation as a society about whether this is the way we want to live or not, exactly. Right? About whether, like, we just, you know, we have to understand that the world is not a safe place. It has never been a safe place for a variety of reasons. And is it acceptable to, you know, live in this way where we fear each other and we, you know, like, we are doing things that don't make sense because maybe there's a 0.0001 chance it might maybe have an effect, or, you know, it's not going to because they've already proven that it doesn't fix anything, but just in case, the whole thing doesn't make sense. We're really damaging our quality of life based on a lot of maybes, right? And
not even just quality of life, the social fabric is being destroyed. The way people treat one another, the way children are being raised. Like, this is really damaging on a deep psycho-emotional level.
This is what I said to him. I said, so, you know, right now we're like, it's not a healthy world for old people to die not having hugged their children. It's not an okay way for children to grow up looking at masked faces. And my dad said, and this was so interesting, and you could hear the emotion in his voice. He said, I agree with you about the old people, but you know what? As far as the masks, I don't think it's a big deal if we get used to living that way. They've been doing it in China for years. And I was like, oh my God. So that's it, right? That's the
we're at normalization. Like, we're right there, and no, people like it. They think it's cool because they can get masks with polka dots, and they can get masks in camouflage, and they get masks with plaid, and all of a sudden it's a new accessory, and celebrities are telling us to wear a mask, and isn't it so great?
Have you noticed that all the, like, I don't know what it looks like where you are in terms of, I mean, I've been to Santa Fe, but like here, you know how like when you're driving on Ventura or like on Wilshire or whatever, you see like, you have the big businesses that you know, but then you see the little small businesses that are like little print shops where they make business cards, or little like mailbox office shops and stuff. All those places are not, they've all switched to, they now print masks with your business logo on. They don't do business cards anymore because nobody has a business except for online shit. So now there's right? So we live in the full-on mask economy. Robert and I were talking about this when this all first started. Like, we have a mask economy now, right? So it's just like, yeah, but the thing with my dad, it's like he really, like, he got what I was saying because he felt it about, like, I think he is sad that he can't hug me and, like, you know, or whatever. Or he thinks
old people, especially old people, to sustain life in later years, need to socialize. They need their activities. They need their hobbies. This is elder abuse, as far as I'm concerned.
It's child abuse and it's everyone abuse, but especially child and elder abuse. For
exactly.
Sure. And yeah, no, I don't think it's okay for children to grow up thinking the way we see people is with a mask on their face.
Well, and also they're not able to learn subtle facial cues. They're not able to learn, like, those things are crucial, crucial to being well socialized.
Yep.
And they're not getting that. And just, you know, for me on a cycle, like I had a full-on meltdown the past 10 days just of it creeping up on the amount of isolation not being balanced out by enough kindness or connection.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to the park last week, it was like one day, a mental health day. And I saw a woman and her 2 kids walking, and I smiled, and she could not get her mask or her children's mask on quickly enough while glaring daggers at me. Yeah. And I'm like, one person, this is happening to everyone. Like, if we were to stop this now, we would all still need mass trauma release and therapy and somatic therapy to move through it. To continue it it's a different type of psychological genocide. It's horrible to witness and be a part of.
We're in a very different phase now, right? Like, it's because the masks have been basically normalized. The staying home has been normalized. Like, people have been talking about, I haven't watched it yet. I don't tend to watch her things, although I know a lot of like her, that the amazing Polly had a great video about that we're involved, obviously, in an experiment that mirrors UN's definition of torture. Right, with the isolation.
You don't like? I'm just shocked. You don't like Amazing Polly?
Well, I'll be honest. This is what I'll be 100% honest with you. I've never watched her. Like, I know what she looks like. I've seen her video.
You love her.
So no, I'll be 100% honest with you. Like, and this is my own. I'm honest about my thing. I'm suspicious of people whose major rise came during the Q phenomenon, and so like I don't do a lot of. I won't say that they're wonderful or terrible, right? But I also just generally, it is my gut instinct that like. But sometimes I'll go take, like, you know.
I urge you to meander around that, because she doesn't actually talk about Q stuff at all. She's more on the medical freedom. Yeah. And she backs everything up. So she'll talk about what's going on, and she'll show all the documentation, and she'll slowly walk everyone through it. She's really smart, and she really knows her stuff. I've
heard pretty much all good things about her, right? And I'm also aware of the analytics right? And so for me, and I'm not saying I'll never look at her, and I have nothing bad to say about her, because I don't know, I haven't watched. But like, there was a whole group of people that rose during a particular period of time, and I kind of I haven't commented on them. I haven't said they're wonderful or they're terrible. I've just kind of put it over here because for me, I guess it was like, I have already a certain, like, system that I use for how I assess information and how I sort of filter stuff for myself. And I guess part of it is like a lack of available time for adding more things to that pile, right? Yeah. And so for me, like at this point, and I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'm happy to, correct myself. My assessment is that the Q phenomenon.
She doesn't talk about Q though, and she doesn't talk about Trump. She doesn't talk about any of that stuff. Okay. I think she's rising now because our medical freedoms are being attacked now. Okay. And it just happens to be topical.
That's entirely possible, right? But those people that came along during that period of time, which she did, right? So for her, in my head, it got lumped in. I'm not saying I won't go take a look, because more than one person have recommended this video. So if I go take a look, I'll start with this video and then assess from there and decide if I want to look at other stuff or not. But my assessment has been, and I feel pretty strongly about this, that the Q phenomenon in general has been damaging to the foundational values of a lot of people in the truth movement. And I could be wrong, but that's just been like
I'm curious, how do you see it being damaging?
Because there's a lot of people who would be okay with the idea of somebody who's been disappeared for 20 years showing up and saying, they like this idea of JFK is going to return and be president or save us or whatever. And the idea that like a person can bring a new level of truth and integrity who's been lying to us for 20 years about where they've been, I find it disturbing. And I see a lot of that stuff with the Q thing, this someone who's shady in a lot of ways, but they're going to do this to help us and whatever. It isn't, there's a lot of factual truths that have come through, right, for a lot more people from the Q thing, but it's gotten to a space where it's like people are willing to accept an outcome if it leads to an outcome that they want, they're not at all concerned with how the things got there. And I'm still looking at this. Like, this is not, I'm not like hanging my hat on this or being like everybody who likes Q is wrong or bad or anything like that. I understand the appeal, right? Because there's been things like this in the past that appealed to me, and it had to go through a long period before I understood in reflection, okay, I learned something from it. And I think people who are going through it, it's an important part of their developing discernment and all that kind of stuff. But that sometimes the new, the foundation for the new level of mind control is laid in the thing that freed you from the old level of mind control.
Totally. I'm a Q agnostic. I dip in and out. I'm agnostic about most things, despite so many of our viewers deciding that I'm an alt-right, whatever. But what I do like about Q when I dip in is their positivity and their optimism. And sometimes when, depending on what media I'm taking in, and I haven't been taking in that much the past few days, Q's excited for what's happening. And so just on a basic, uplifting mood level, to tap into a frequency where people are excited about the justice that is being served in the wake of all the other, all the elements of all the craziness we're going on, there's a piece of it. And my sense is that it's a psyop, of course, and like all psyops, it's a psyop that has some truth and has some lies. This is a weird one in that it relies on time travel and faked deaths and all the reasons that it's weird, the coding and whatnot, who knows?
Well, actually, some of those things are the more fascinating parts about it, because they get into the way reality might actually work, and that things aren't linear and things aren't so set the way we think. Everything is movable and manageable by just changing a code on something or switching the timestamp on something. You can actually change reality. So we should know that for our own plans for ourselves as well.
Totally. But a lot of the Q leaks are predictive and then end up coming true. And a lot of the Q leaks that are predictive rely on so many external factors that there are moments where I'm like, yeah, maybe they are dealing in a different level of time travel and time understanding than the rest of us.
Popped in on Conspiracy Cocktail in a while, and several weeks back we were into this whole thing of there are parallel realities that exist really close to one another, but that time travels in the opposite direction, and there's a zone in between where you can kind of go back and forth between the two. So sometimes, because something has already happened in the reality where time traveling is the other way, they can dip over to this reality real fast and it hasn't happened yet. So, but they know it's coming, and so they can catch the bullet as it's being shot, right? Kind of thing, because they know where it's going, and so they can already be there with the shield kind of thing, right? Yeah. Or whatnot. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now. There's so, like, the level of, like, coding in terms of things about time, and, like, even just now, like, I was, like, reading I'm like, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. Let me just quickly, I've been super busy all day, but let me just quickly glance the front page of Drudge, and everything is like total tyranny. But then there's one article, and I just opened it, didn't even get a chance to start reading it, about, are there too many laws? Like, are we living in a time of too many laws? Yes, of course we're living in it, right? So, like, it's weird, like, there, which is this, like, I can see, like, hints at certain things. Like, yesterday I went through Drudge Report, and the 2 articles I chose to pick out were, and I sent them to Jeff, and I don't know why, but then later we were able to turn it into a cohesive narrative. But, like, there was an article from, like, the Iran Daily or something, Iran Daily, that was about Neanderthal DNA and how it relates to COVID-19. And then the other article I just decided to pick out, so I picked that article out because it pertains to a conversation we had when we were in Arizona about outliers with possibly mutable blood types and DNA and things like that, and that the control system has a governance problem. So this felt like it related to that, right? And then there was an article about Black armed protesters marching through a Confederate memorial in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And for some reason that stuck with me, because Stone Mountain, Georgia is where Cynthia McKinney and before her father were representatives from, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
it's interesting that that's going on there, right?
Yeah.
And then Jeff comes back at me with something about, like, the purpose of the Civil War was to erase the history and culture of integrated giants, Blacks, Irish, Indians, blah, blah, blah. So integrated giants could be a Neanderthal kind of thing, right? And the Blacks and Irish, there's always conversation about slavery, and both come up in that. And of course, Cynthia McKinney is an Irish last name, obviously, and she's obviously Black. So there's, like, some, it isn't necessarily represented in factual reality, but there's some code that's moving through all of these stories right now, and I'm constantly on the lookout for that. And I'm tracking the idea of less oxygen on the planet because of, we're being told that COVID makes you unable to breathe. It's a respiratory thing. Also, George Floyd can't breathe, right? There's a lot of, and
do you believe that? Why are we giving that legitimacy?
Oh, I believe that they're coding, memeing into people's minds that, like, breathing problems are on the horizon. Right? Like, one of the things right now is...
Oh, that's so interesting that you say that, because so many of Bill Gates' psycho genocide projects are based on too much CO2.
Right. So here's the whole, like, if you watched Fringe and the final dystopian season of Fringe, the observers had carbon CO2 generators in Central Park, right? Because the CO2 wasn't good for them. So they were trying to reduce the amount of oxygen in the air, right? So it's possible that, like, there's something coming in that doesn't do as well with oxygen. So a lower amount of oxygen in the environment is going to be beneficial for that, even though it's bad for humans. So the people who are able to adapt to that are going to be fine, and other people are not going to be able to breathe, right? And people are getting training for not being able to breathe by having a mask on and rebreathing their own CO2 to see who that kills off. There's all sorts of shit you can do with it, right? And I'm not saying I'm right about any of it, but I noticed, like, why do they keep saying this, right? There's obviously articles constantly referencing that government's ready to acknowledge UFOs right now. There's obviously this meme we're tracking with fucking fireworks going off everywhere, and what does that mean? So there's a million little, like, things that, like, it isn't about what the story is saying. It's about what that idea, like, why are they talking about this? Like, why are the tension?
Right, why are they programming us in this particular way?
Yes. And so, like, for me, that's kind of, you know, just how I've been following this, because it is, like, nothing makes any fucking sense. Like, I have been tracking that Rebel Wisdom is doing a series called The War on Sense Making, right? And I pop in and out of that. Yeah.
No, Rebel Wisdom lost me when he ripped David Icke as a conspiracy theorist, had no, like, way too much ego there. And Schmachtenberger on his meaning making is fucking compromised. He's total CIA asset at this point.
But to my point about, right, like, there has a series right now about the war on sense making, where they're telling us things that don't make sense, but for some reason they're putting this idea out that they're like that, you know, right?
I feel like he's compromised at this point. I'm saying that because I'm asking you, because you're tracking media, and, like, why you wouldn't want to check in on Amazing Polly. I have tracked Rebel Wisdom, and I feel like all of a sudden he just turned on all of us. What's your sense of it?
Well, I don't watch enough enough times. I'll pop in here and there. For some reason, if something catches me, I'll listen to a few minutes of that video, a few minutes of that video. I'll tell you this right now, the video I watched of him the other day, I'm 100% with the way he analyzed Brian Rose and London Real. Like I
thought he analyzed Brian Rose and London Real great when he jumped to Ike.
I didn't
he
hear
had
that.
No idea what he was talking about. And given that the first half was all about his journalism cred and what it means to be a good journalist, and then he just pulled shit out of his ass without doing any research and tried to destroy Ike's reputation without knowing anything, that was a problem for me.
Well, the thing I watched didn't actually, the only way it was just referenced Ike in terms of that's when Brian Rose made his big jump into, you know, being noticed by everybody or whatever, right? So I didn't actually hear him talking about David Icke at all, so I can't speak to that intelligently. But again, right, this is like, he has a certain way that he perceives reality and whatnot. So like the things that he knows what he's talking about some of those things, okay, some of the things he says make sense, right? But he doesn't actually know about other stuff. And so it's like me trying to talk about something I don't know anything about, right? And maybe he doesn't.
Kind of like what the left does about like masks and science and politics.
But I'm not I find the show to be weird. Like I find it to be like really on about some things and then so far off about other things that it doesn't make sense. So in my mind, they're participating in the war on sense making by making a documentary about the war on sense making.
So was the war on sense making with Daniel Schmachtenberger, or was it separate from him?
So what it seems like, and again, I haven't watched enough to know, that this idea launched with a special they did with him. Okay, and then they've taken it out and talked to other people about this idea and ways that it works, and I have not watched enough to know. But I did listen to about 45 minutes of that original with Daniel Schmachtenberger, and I'm just kind of like, what are you talking about? It doesn't even make sense. Like what he said, it's like such a blah, 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 like gobbledygook. Like it's kind of like when you listen to Brett Weinstein lay out the parameters for one of his thought exercises. At a certain point, it's like, huh? You lost me. You're going into such detail about something that, what are you even talking? Yeah. And I have the ability to follow things pretty far down a rabbit hole, but at a certain point, I was just like, what are you even talking about? So I mean,
that's interesting. That inspires me to want to check it out, because I was a Schmachtenberger fan before all this nonsense started. Mm-hmm. And then when the nonsense started and he started shoving out fear at like decibel 5 trillion all the time on social media, I was like, wait a minute, what happened to you? Who got to you? So now hearing that he wasn't coherent and that you weren't tracking what he was saying, I got to check in on it, because yeah, something's going on there.
Something funny is going on there. So we're watching this happen though. There's all these different sort of lines of information, right? All sorts of, Jeff called it, the way Jeff refers to them as data streams, right? And some of them are just looping back on some of their same old stuff. Others are going off into new territory with the right kind of intention, others not, right? There's all sorts of weird stuff going on right now. So it's like, it's almost like impossible to find anything that would in any way qualify as what a person might have at one point in time thought of as news. Everything is a shit show, right? Everything is just like, this is the biggest disaster ever. Like you can find a few good things. Like I thought Matt Taibbi had a really good article he wrote criticizing the woman who wrote the White Fragility book. Like his article was really good. And that's
nice. I want to check that out.
Like he's always pretty solid. You know what I mean? Sometimes I think in live interviews, he backs down from being as aggressive towards some people as he should be. But in terms of the way he writes his articles, I feel like he's pretty solid. So there's been a few good things here and there. But like a lot of stuff, like it's like, okay, you're starting to read it. It sounds good. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, what the fuck happened? You just totally jumped and lost the plot there.
Yeah,
right?
completely.
So, and there is still, like when I go about my day-to-day life, there isn't like, sure you see the occasional person with a mask who's doing what you're talking about, although I see less and less of that. Because I guess I go less and less places where that's a thing. I see people smile at me when I'm out exercising and running. The peacock is still on the golf course. Like, you know, as far as I'm being able to connect with the people I want to connect with. And the part that happens out there seems more like a minor annoyance a lot of times. It doesn't even happen that, you know. Arizona was more annoying this time, you know, but it was just like, so I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm not sure that there's a data. Dude, the lights just flashed on and off. And I don't even have the lights on in the house. That was really weird. There's no lights on in the house, but it just went. Did you see the flash? It like went dark in here.
You see the flash.
Yeah, you did?
Do you have Faraday bags for all your electronics?
I don't. We're looking at ordering some the other day. Yes.
Okay, it's not that hard. Just click and get them.
Yeah, I know.
Or put them in the microwave if you have one.
We have yes, I know the microwave thing, that we do have that. So it's just like, it's becoming more and more challenging to assess information because
it's not consistent or linear as to how this is rolling itself out. And now that the red states are on board with this, I'm like, okay, now I really don't know what's going on. Before I thought there were moments where I thought I got it. Okay, this is the color revolution. All these people are on board with the coup. Now I really don't get it.
The masks are about, so obviously we know it's about social control and all that kind of shit, but it's also about something else.
Well,
right?
Here's how it's showing up in Santa Fe, because our scuzzy, globalist, sellout, traitorous governor passed an edict, I think, this week last week saying that anyone caught without a mask is fined $100, and any business caught with people inside without masks are fined.
Right, so they're turning the business owners into the Gestapo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it went crazy here. And what I've noticed, like I got thrown out of FedEx, and I met with some people on the plaza, at the rail yard where our farmer's market is, where I've also been banned.
Yeah.
And there were 6 of us not wearing masks, and they came over and said, you're 6 people gathered, and there should only be 5, and you're not wearing masks, and you need to get out of here. And they called the cops. But then my car got fucked up. I know. And, but then my car broke. My mechanic's out of town. I went to AutoZone for diagnostic. No one at AutoZone, which is the south side of town, which is like the poor side of town, they're not wearing masks. They don't care that I'm wearing masks. And I realize I think they call them Karens. It's like the rich, privileged people, at least in Santa Fe, who are the mask holes. Like the fucktards who need to rat on everyone.
To talk to the manager at the restaurant, right? It's the same people. So like, so I worked in the restaurant industry for years, right? Many years. And only one time did I ever have a customer complain. Well, it wasn't even really a complaint, right? Like, it was, so when Cheesecake Factory would have secret shoppers, right? And they'd come in and they'd eat like a normal person, and then they'd do a review and whatever. If you got a bad shop, whatever. So this was back in Austin. This was a long time ago. It's a busy night, right? The couple sits down, 2 females. One of them was very heavy, right? And they're at a little tiny 2-top that's like right next to another little tiny 2-top. And there's a lot of people sort of in the areas between the tables because people are getting sat and whatever. So I come over to talk to them, and I slide just between the 2 tables. There was not a lot of room, just like this much. And I watched the heavier chick look at me like, fucking that bitch with that little ass, dude, what a bitch, right? And I knew right then, I knew right then that this chick does not like me. I give them great service, like I do everyone else, whatever. 2 days later, I called into the office. You got a bad shop. I was like, I know who it is. And before they even went right into whatever the complaints were ridiculous. It was things that didn't even make sense. And that my boss even understood, because I went play by play before they told me anything. The series of sequences. I remembered what they ordered. I remember how everything went down. But I told him, I said, I knew the moment I walked between, she looked at me, squeezed right in, right? And like, I saw that look on her face where she wanted to call for the manager, but you can't call for the manager when you're secret shopping, right? Because skinny little bitch just squeezed between the tables and I don't like it, right? Kind of thing. But those types that are always like, this is highly appropriate. Inappropriate. Can I please talk to the manager? That's the people who are doing all this shit.
I waited tables for 12 years, so I know what you're talking about. Though it was always the rich, privileged people who were the biggest pains in the asses and had to complain the most. And it's the same. It's like the guilt from being rich and having it easier, and so they overcompensate by protecting everyone with this nonsense. And it's really annoying here in Santa Fe because everyone else is chill. Santa Fe, the way it works, it's like Hispanics, natives, and white people. And they don't really mix, and they don't really want to mix, and everyone kind of does their own thing. And with this mass nonsense, it's the white people
that are crazy. That
are freaking crazy. And it's really annoying.
Yeah, you're a racist.
Of course I'm racist. I'm racist. I'm alt-right. I'm a Nazi. I'm every terrible name in the book. that name callers want to call me. The good news is I did just get back like 20 minutes before our show started from the hot springs at Ojo Caliente, and no one gave me shit for not wearing a mask, and no one was wearing a mask, and it was heaven.
That's high-end stuff, but then that's reasonably high-end stuff, so that's interesting. That's good.
Yeah, well, they're only open for lodging, so it was like my girlfriend and I split a room so that we could
say, we looked at going there before, so I know it's really nice there. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really nice California style. They've done it up. It is nice. It's totally nice. But it was just so nice to be normal and treated normal and not infantilized and be around other people who were acting normal. It was like a vacation from 2020.
Yeah. That's how it was in Arizona last time, but this time it was like, what the fuck? Right? So, okay. So I just want to just throw this in here, and then we can move on to the next topic, or get back to another topic, or go back.
Have we chosen a topic?
No. Someone, and I've had this, you and I have, well, we haven't really talked about this. I guess I've thought about it. My suspicion might be that you thought about it as well, but I've had the suggestion before, but like more intensely this time, that people would like to see us with someone interview somebody together, because you and I have different perspectives on things, and they think it could be interesting and whatnot. And so my response to the person was, well, actually, I agree. I think that could be really interesting. But I think some of the people that we might be most interested in interviewing are not necessarily the people who are in my sort of realm of the alternative media, where I know how to sort of work that out with people. And it's more in an area where they're, quote, considered political or social commentators, and they may have reservations about talking with us, you know, kind of thing. And so like if there was somebody who could sort of help us bridge that gap in terms of put out the thing, say, hey, there's these two chicks and they probably disagree with you, but they'll have an interesting conversation with you, and they'll let you say your piece, and they'll be cool and whatever. Like that would be interesting. There are people I think it would be interesting for us to talk to.
Who?
Well, one of the things, so like I can think of a couple, like they're mostly people that I would consider to be like on the fringe line between like left and alternative, right?
Okay.
To a certain extent. And so just the other day I was listening to, I didn't even listen to the thing. I just clicked on it for a second, because you know, like you're looking at your YouTube feed, you can't find anything good, so you just click on anything. And it was Heather Hang and Brett on their little question and answer on their Dark Horse thing. I thought, oh, Dani knows Heather. Like that might be interesting, right? Like if we could be, even though we've talked about what some of the issues are there, like if we give them a fair, they can say their thing, listen to our thoughts back and forth, and it's all fairly civil, and be very clear that we don't, we don't need, you know, we're not implying that they should necessarily agree with us or whatever. But I think the conversation could be interesting because you and I are in different places. So for them to just say, what you're saying is crazy, that's conspiracy theory stuff, they'd have to address it in two separate ways, because you and I are not, you know, we're in the same book, but we're not on the same page about everything, right? And I would say that like that goes, like they're probably on similar pages with us on some things and totally not on other things. So I think there is like a cool, civil, but like good debate kind of conversation that could be had. I don't know that it leads anywhere, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. And since nothing is linear anyway, what is the point of anything ever leading anywhere anyway?
Well, plus they're both San Fernando Valley kids, so we all have the same motherland.
Oh, that's
yeah. They went to high school together. They're both from, I think they went to Oakwood.
Where's that?
Sherman Oaks. It was like a fancy prep school in Sherman Oaks. It was one of the schools I looked at, but was a little too progressive for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting conversation. Because I look at them and I do know Heather, and from, you know, I don't know her super well, but from what I know, like, I don't think she's the shill that I have accused Brett of being after his last Joe Rogan thing. And part of me wonders if they just haven't thought through a lot of the things that you and I have thought through to understand the larger meta play.
I don't think Brett is a shill, but I think because he, like, they were very...
I think he's an inadvertent shill. I don't think that he knows that he's being
used by other people who are manipulative, because he is well-intended, he is good-hearted and good-natured and all that kind of stuff. And so he's being marionetted a little bit, right? And I think that they were in a bubble that really worked well for them for their life for a long time. They had the freedom. It's like when a kid goes to like Waldorf school and they don't have to deal with the regular classroom stuff because they're just doing all creative stuff and baking bread and dancing and doing finger painting and shit, and they don't have to deal with it. So they had the kind of college version of that, and they're both very idealist, and I do think they deeply care about people and they treat people fairly. I do think that about both of them.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I
and
do as well.
They were in this very isolated, sheltered environment, and then they got thrown into the kiln, right?
Yeah.
And they've had to adjust to, and I think Brett is more so like naive in the sense that Heather is. I think Heather's a little bit more, right? Like, I
think she's a little more worldly and cosmopolitan just in her perspective and her worldview. It's weird to me because it feels like there's the issue of like the fish who can't really speak objectively about water because they're immersed in the water. It doesn't seem like, from being immersed in academia, it doesn't seem like they understand how academia has been used by the various communist forces to mind control generations. Like it feels like they haven't made that connection.
Yeah, like I agree with you. It feels like there's not a lot of awareness about the Frankfurt School or the Prussian education system or anything like that. And there's not obviously a familiarity with the Yuri Bezmenov kind of line of thinking, right? Exactly. You know, so, but I do think that like given the right situation where they could sort of come into the jacuzzi at a temperature that feels good, and then you can sort of turn it, and I don't mean this in the boiling the frog sense, but like, you know, I do think that these are two people that even if you know, I no longer am, when I'm talking to people, trying to convince them of anything. I'm trying to have an effective dialogue back and forth so that we can all coexist relatively peacefully and understand and respect one another. And if someone shifts in their position to something that I think is a little more representative of reality, that's great, but that isn't necessarily the goal I'm going for anymore, right? I'm not trying to convert people, right? I'm trying to find a way that we can coexist peacefully, right? And I do think they have a temperament that could happen with, and I'd be really like, you know, I'd be curious to I think that there's some things that you and I have talked about that nobody has ever pointed out to them. It's never occurred to them because it seems so far off the plantation that they come from, right? But it really isn't. Like, there's a logic to some of the things being said that you or I might say that I think their intellectual mind can at least say that's interesting. I disagree with that. Interesting. So, so if anybody out, so you know, Heather, maybe reach out and see. Just
it's worth a shot.
Yeah, it's worth a shot, and you know, like I like them both, right? Like I get frustrated with some of this stuff because it's like, oh guys, you guys are so right about some stuff, and then the other stuff, it's like, but you know, like it on the chance that I'm off in some of my thinking, I would love to have it explained to me as to why they think that is.
Totally. I think that would be great because we dug into Brett pretty hard on our Afterwords, and I would really love to know, because I do respect both of their intellects and, you know, generalized, like, expansive unity consciousness. I know you have your issues with that phrase, but like their generalized, like, loving, caring, compassionateness. I would love to know.
They are definitely for people. They are not for the board. They're definitely for people. Yeah. So,
so I would love to know, like, I would love to just dig deeper into, like, okay, explain to me why Andrew Yang is a good idea, why this other guy is a good idea. Like, expand my mind so that I can get out of whatever corner I might have painted myself into.
I'm just curious is if Brett is even aware of the issues with the raid on the compound, that the McGraven, the guy he's suggesting who ran that supposed operation, right? That is he aware of the voluminous amounts of information that, you know, Osama bin Laden was dead long before that occurred, right? Is he even like looked into that, or has he been so like programmed away from looking into anything that might be deemed conspiratorial? My sense would be if he really is genuine about the process he's gone through as what happened to him happened, then he should be more like open to at least really taking a good, long, hard look before deciding something is insane.
Totally. One thing that I've noticed, and I've noticed this in myself and noticed it in other people, is that those of us who were more, you know, I've never been like a registered Democrat, But
Mhm.
those of us who are more liberally minded and have had relied so long on New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, whatnot, that it takes a long time to wean away, not just from the validity of those sources, but from all the narratives and all the perspectives. Like, that is a process that takes time, and there are different phases along the way. And I just feel like they're still in the process of
Yeah.
getting out of that.
I agree with you. I think that's true for the most part. And even though like I was a registered Democrat, I probably still am because I haven't bothered to unregister, but like I don't vote. I've never voted. So it's hilarious to me when people like accuse me of like really being a secret Trump supporter or like being a secret fascist or I've never
Do
voted
people
for,
accuse you of being a secret Trump supporter?
yeah, but because I didn't vote for Hillary, that therefore I support Trump. Right. So yeah, that's a big one in my family.
Wow.
But I've never voted for a Republican. The only Republican that I ever even spent a moment thinking about possibly voting for wasn't even really a Republican. It was Ron Paul, and I thought about it for about 10 minutes, and I moved on past that into anarchy before any election came up, and so it wasn't, But I think what you're saying is 100% correct, except for in the rare occasion that the thing that, depending on what it was that woke you up, right? And the thing that woke me up had nothing to do with left-right issues. Like my wake up thing was I took this class and that was only available for one semester, and then they got rid of that because they realized that shit was going to cause problems. This class I've talked about this before is called the Sociology of Drug Use, and that was that's where I started to sort of be reminded of the MK Ultra thing or whatever. But that's not what woke me up. What woke me up was she had created a textbook for the class. It was like a binder kind of thing, right? She had the original, unavailable, really hard to find anymore at that time, original documents that Gary Webb used to figure out the Iran-Contra crack cocaine, Rick Ross thing, and realize how that literally the crack epidemic was caused by the CIA. Right, it was caused by the government. They did this intentionally. It was it was a complete 100% textbook case of problem, reaction, solution, and it wasn't partisan. And so for me, I just saw how the mechanism of creating a problem so you could install a solution that you had decided beforehand that was what you wanted to do, and you had to create, right? Like it was 100%. Like I looked at this, I'm like, oh my God! The people who who want to solve the problems create them, and it had nothing to do with who was running for president that year or a war that we were involved in right then or any kind of social movement that was going on at all. It was about something that had happened many years earlier and that nobody actually talked about anymore. So there was no social pressure for me to think about that topic one way or the other, right? And that was how I woke up. So I saw the mechanism, and it didn't have any pull right or left. And so I could just look at the mechanism and go, oh, now I know how this works. Every situation, I'm going to apply this. I'm going to see if it matches that. If it matches that, I know that the right-left aspect of it is nonsense. Right. And so for me, I think I got really lucky in that, just like, oh, I see how, I just saw the trick, right? I saw the trick, and you couldn't confuse me with political nonsense about it, right? Yeah. And so, but yes, I do think that if your wake up is like GMOs or something like that, or 5G, because that is something that still a lot of liberals are largely against as well. Your people who that's one area that people on the far right and the far left can agree on sometimes is health freedom. Totally. Right? So if that's your wake up, that narrative is still sometimes partially supported by the people who love NPR. So it makes it harder to wake up to the rest of their propaganda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the same thing happens on the right as well for different issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I think, so I do like that idea of guests. And so I would ask for, if people have, I'm not interested in having the same guests that I have on the other kinds of programs that I do on here. I'm interested in having guests that are more political or social commentators in nature rather than people who analyze it from a conspiratorial position.
That's what popped into my mind was when you said this was let's interview the alternative press. I think that would be really interesting. I would love to interview Tim Pool. I would love to interview Styx Hexenhammer and what is his shit with Vax. I would love to talk to Candace Owens. I would love to, I don't know, these are the people that are popping to mind right now.
Yeah. So I think we're going to have to start maybe a little closer in and put it pushed out because, you know, we're still a small show, you know what I mean? But I think it could be pretty interesting. And I think, yeah, and I would like to, you know, there's a few others that I can think of that would be sort of interesting for us to talk to. There's a guy named Michael Malice that I think is interesting. I actually think.
Oh, I know Michael Malice.
You know him? Like I think he's super. Yeah, I think he's super interesting. Like maybe we should look at some of your contact list because you used to operate in more of that sort of political journalistic world, and look at your contact list and see if there's anything that pops out there that might be interesting. I think your contact list is more relevant to that point than mine is.
I'm happy to check it out. And also I invite our viewers, like, who do you think would be awesome? And do you know them to put us in touch?
Yeah. Do you know them? Are you their patrons? And so a lot of times people will take suggestions from patrons that they don't take from just other random people or whatnot. So I think it'd be cool. And so we're going to do some work on it, but if people can jump in and help us out with that as well, I think that would be kind of awesome. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So request hopefully granted to the person who, who requested that. So what else, is there anything else kind of that you're sort of like eyeing or what's on your radar or anything else going on for you?
What's on my radar? I mean,
going on in terms of like the social, like, so we kind of talked about the masks and the COVID nonsense. What's going on in terms of like the social temperature as far as race relations and all of that kind of, I mean, you tied it into the fact that like the poor areas of town and where the Mexicans and natives are, they don't seem to be falling for the COVID kind of cockeye, but what's going on like with the racial tensions?
So did I tell you about, remind me about the city council meeting I spoke at? I don't think we've done a show since then.
Okay, I know that you were involved with something related to that, but I don't know really what's going on. So go ahead.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, I signed up to speak at our city council meeting, which is on Zoom now. Mm-hmm. And there were 72 people signed up to speak. 71 people wanted to talk about taking down statues, and 1 person wanted to talk about masks. So it was interesting to see, it was I mean, this social engineering is so fascinating to me. Like just that image of how many people gathered for the BLM protest, but no one blinks an eye about shutting down the entire global economy. It was similar in how many people had such passionate views on why we either needed to take the statues down or really needed to protect the statues. Mm-hmm. But no, again, no one gives a shit about like the masks or whatnot. So they pulled a fake white supremacist attack here, which is ridiculous. Like white supremacists would not live in Santa Fe. There are too many brown people. It just we don't have that shit here. So they pulled this fake, they vandalized an Indian restaurant. And so apparently, like they hate Indian people. And it was like, okay, but Indian people are and I'm stereotyping, but like generally support Trump because of what's going on with China at the India-China border, which again, for me remains.
Right. Did they see if any of the Chinese people had done the attack? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So they did this fake vandalism thing to push forward their like defund the police and that whole mishigas. And I haven't met one person here who believes it, not one, but that has definitely generated this defund the police thing among some of the younger, I mean, it seems to be that that's like a 20, 30 something, the people who did get that sort of Marxist inculcation through academia, whatnot. So there are murmurings of that happening here. We don't have real racial tensions because we don't have a lot of Black people here. And most of the issues are between the Hispanics and the natives. And I don't even know what that is really about. So I don't know. I mean, it's weird. It's definitely weird here. The free people are the minority. And there's definitely a concern because we already have a pretty weakened, low level competency police force. And I don't mean that to insult anyone on the police force. We just don't really get the cream of the crop here. And I've heard that a lot of the police are thinking of leaving because of this like new level of vilification and like, you know, angry teenagers who don't know what to do with their hormonal rage. So it's like all police suck. Mm-hmm. But that's, you know, I hear that. Like, I move around town and it's basically fine, minus like wealthy white people freaking out about masks.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I can't say, like, I mean, I go out here in Arizona and there's all sorts of, you know, posters and windows about supporting Black Lives Matter. And there's in every city that we've been in our travels, even little tiny.
We have those too. We have those too.
Even like we were in this like tiny little town called Globe, Arizona, that is like, it's like, what the fuck happened here, dude? It's like, there's nothing, like, terrifyingly like in shambles and defunct, but still there's a brand new mural on a building that has George Floyd saying, "I can't breathe," right? So like, you know, we're seeing that stuff, but I'm not seeing like, you know, any like the agitation really seems to be more about the mask stuff and the virus stuff than it does about the social issue stuff.
Right. Like, I'm not experiencing, when I left LA, I would say even September, October, I could feel racial tensions in my meanderings on the east side of town. You know, I felt that very much alive. I don't feel it here. I see where it's trying to be generated through words, but I don't feel it in any real way.
Like, you're talking about like that thing that was on the wall at the cafe about fighting for peace and that kind of stuff. Is that what you're talking about? What you saw before?
In LA?
Yeah.
No, I was like almost attacked at a gas station on Normandy. I was coming up Normandy near Santa Monica on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And for some reason there was a ton of traffic. It didn't make sense. So I cut through the gas station, and it was like how gas stations used to be in the 70s where there were lines. It was really weird. And all I wanted to do was cut through to Santa Monica. So I come around the corner and there's this guy in a car who wants to get to the gas pump, but there's someone at the pump. It's not available. So I like aggressively blocked him so that I could get out, and he totally lost it. And he got out of the car and came up to my window and he's like, "I'm about to bust your window, bitch, and bust your fucking face in." And he was yelling at me, and I got clear, like, this is not about me. This is way bigger, and just defer. And I was like, "I got you, no problem. Do you want me to back up?" And then this other woman, he was a Black man, and she got out of our car and she's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Bust that white bitch. Kick the shit out of that white bitch." And all of a sudden it became like, because I'm white, and she was egging him on. And as he came, like, he literally pulled a fist back, and it was like, my guides or my ancestors or something came in, and he just turned and went and attacked the guy at the pump. Like, he was just
looking to attack some, yeah.
He just needed the energy to move and like needed to get it out. But I'd never had a racial incident. I never had any sort of violence like that directed at me in LA at all. And that was before, I mean, BLM has had a presence in LA. I went to their meetings back in the day just to see what it was about, but I could feel that bubbling last year.
Yeah. It's interesting too. There's still almost no conversation about how all this money BLM has raised is being funneled to Joe Biden.
Well, if you mention it, you're a racist.
Black Lives Matter. Elect an old white guy. Black Lives Matter. Elect an old white guy.
Well, have you seen the videos that emerged of a young Joe Biden like spewing the N-word so effortlessly? No, I mean, it's fine because they're going to throw at least 2 or 3 more other people into the race before November. I don't think in a million years it's going to be Biden.
Oh.
I've heard murmurs of it being Hillary or Hillary and Michael, aka Michelle.
Wait,
yeah, but that's all that's up here. I mean, where I'm at, having moved my attention from like working on the documentary to try to save the world from this shit, and then moving my energy to Santa Fe to try to protect Santa Fe from this shit, I got really down just by how mean and hateful people are.
Yeah.
Partially towards me, but more so just in general. Just seeing it and seeing people so easily dehumanize one another, having people tell me they hope I get the virus and die. Like, just things coming out of their mouth that are just so awful.
Yeah.
I hit the wall, and now I'm in a place where and you've heard me say this a million times, where I feel like let the Matrix have its own shit show, and I'm just gonna write a new quantum languaging book and take my energy out of it
that's the whole thing, is that it's just, on a certain level, like, while I enjoy the analysis of what's going on, and I feel like I use that to help myself be very conscious about what I'm creating as I go forward. And the continual observation of the other examples of what's going on is important to keep your mind sharp in that, but there's no point in putting any energy into, like, there's not, like I think resistance is a waste of time. Like, I think all of this, like, any, like, trying, and this was, I think, some of my point, and maybe I wasn't eloquent with it in our last show, right, is just like all this stuff about Constitution and free speech and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, it isn't that those things aren't important, but it's like right now it's such a mess, and like spending a lot of time trying to preserve something that, like, obviously most people don't seem to appreciate, just takes time away from you putting energy into whatever the new reality we're going to create is, because we're not going back to the old. It's never going back. And so any time wasted trying to hang on to something that is never coming back, just stealing from your future, right? And stealing from, and so we need to be mindful about paying attention so that we don't fall into some of these same traps. But it's just kind of like, I have a lot of energy, right? And I'm not willing to give it away to something that is just, it's a waste of time.
Exactly. That's where I'm at now. So I'm just like, I'm reading Saul Alinsky's book. I'm studying communism just to get myself up to speed. And I'm really just more and more devoted to what's the new, what are our solutions? How fun can we make it? And let them have their little, like, slave world.
Yeah. So, I think that, like, we're obviously in this place. I think portals to many different realities are available all around us. I think that, like, we can start generating our own Mandela effects, and and that's just it. Like, we're just literally, to a certain extent, just like, oh, we don't like this one, okay, let's go over here and create this. That's what they do, right?
Exactly.
Instead of trying to stop them from doing it, just figure out what they're doing and come up with their own creative way to hide ours from them, or whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that, I feel like it's just more about being invisible, not attracting too much attention, just moving between the cracks and between the worlds and doing our own thing.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. We agree.
Yay! We agree.
All right. We better hop off before.
Totally. We agree. We're out.
Tell everybody, you just give us a little bit about what you're doing, but what are you up to? Where can people find you? What are your offerings of the week?
My offerings of the week are transformational coaching, getting your head on straight. I'm really helping a lot of people right now amp up their sovereignty and empowerment to move through this with confidence. So reach out to me at either quantumlanguaging.com or dannycatz.com. I'm doing a new podcast, The Conscious Awesome Show with Justin, and thanks for sending me.
So go check him out. And he makes yummy chocolate, right? So there you go.
Makes the best chocolate. Yes, yeah. Cacao.
Cool. And I am available for nutrition consultations, life coaching, and I'm starting to do a lot more with offering services to people who feel they've had the mind control kind of experience, have had some history with what they think might be MK Ultra or whatnot, and just want someone to sort of walk through some of the transition phase from making that recognition to deciding what you're going to do about it. I'm starting to do more stuff with that. So reach out to me if you are interested in any of that. And lots of changes going on over the Off Planet Media Patreon too, so people check that out and stay tuned. I have all sorts of cool stuff coming. Conspiracy Cocktail is still rocking. We're doing it every other weekend now. And yeah, so come play. You guys know where to find me. Emily Moyer YouTube channel, Off Planet Media YouTube channel, and patreon.com/Off Planet Media. We will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.